Hello, and welcome to Talk Relationship to Me, the show that explores some of the most important relationship topics. I'm Dr. Elana Hoffman. As a clinical psychologist, I focus on all things relationships, from dating to sex to long-term relationships to divorce. I cover it all. I use my professional lens as a psychologist as well as lived experience to cover these topics. Do you need to talk relationships? You're in the right place. Today, I'm joined by Melissa Marie Pavone, a certified financial planner and certified divorce financial analyst, and the founder of Mindful Divorce Partners. Melissa specializes in helping individuals navigate the financial side of divorce with clarity and confidence, guiding them through everything from asset division to long-term planning. She's known for her collaborative, practical approach and her belief that financial clarity should come before legal action. Melissa, welcome to Talk Relationship to Me.
Thanks so much for having me on today. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. This is such an important conversation. I have so many clients who have lots of concerns about finances and, it's just a big fear and unknown and of course keeps people in situations that are not great. So the work that you do specifically around divorce and financial planning is amazing and so important. So yeah, please tell us a little more about what you do and
Yeah, I always start with my why, and my why is my mom. I was a child of divorce, and my mom made a lot of decisions with her heart instead of her head. And it has impacted her ability to retire. And so when I am sitting across either the computer, right, because we do a lot on Zoom these days, or across from my desk with a client, I look at them as family, right? And I really want to educate and empower them to make the best decisions for them. It's not necessarily fighting, right? But it's making informed decisions. And I think a lot of times people through the divorce process, because it's so emotional, they don't know that there's options, right? It's sort of like what's put in front of them from their lawyer. That's what they have to do, and they just do it. So I've really made it my life's mission to really just educate and empower people that there are choices out there and there are other professionals such as myself and you, right, to really help support them through the process. I talk a lot about a team, and the first call, right, should be you. We need to start
Mhm.
with emotional support. So oftentimes people are like, hey, we should go to you before the attorney. Yes, right, to the finances. However, even before you get to me, I recommend a mental health professional, a divorce coach, somebody to help regulate their emotional nervous system, because we need to really be present during this. And a lot of times I'll see if people come to me and they're not ready, I say, let's pause. Let's get you some resources. Let's get emotionally regulated and then come back. And then we can be more effective, right, with our time and our money talking about finances, because when they get to me, they have to be really present, right? And really like, okay, I am here now and I'm willing to like listen and work and look what my options are.
Yeah, totally. I think I see so many people make decisions right from like your mom from an emotional place, and it's really understandable because things feel so big and scary. And also people just want to get the divorce process over with. Once they kind of start it, they want it to be done. They want the papers to be signed, they want to move on, and that can color the decisions. So I think, stepping back and saying there's no actual rush here. It's better to take the time and get really grounded and move forward in a mindful way is so important because I also see, people just make decisions from a place of anxiety and unresolved trauma and all these things that come up when you're going through a divorce. It's like lots of emotional stuff. And so being able to work with, yeah, a therapist or a coach to ground people and really work through that stuff, not that you're gonna figure everything out, but coming from a grounded place rather than a place of, "I just need to get this done. I need to figure this out." Walk away.
Absolutely. I call it the power of the pause. And when you get to that point, when you're like, that's it, I don't care, whatever, that's the very pivotal point in the
Totally.
divorce process where it's like, okay, let's take some deep breaths. And like, this is exactly where we need to slow down and just pause and really reevaluate, because I understand that it's traumatic going through it, it's expensive. I say it's emotionally draining and it's financially draining, right? It's like,
Mhm.
it's terrible. Nobody wins. However, you don't want to make long-term financial decisions in heightened emotional states. And that's like my mission, right? I just want, if anything else, I just want people to realize that if you're going to make a long-term decision, you don't want to make it in a heightened emotional state. And I think it's really hard when you're in it, right? You're trying to get through the day. You are not thinking. You're in survival mode, right? You're not thriving, you're surviving. You're trying to get through the day. You're trying to say, okay, how am I going to pull my shit together, right? So I can pick up my kids and make dinner and do bedtime and then, unpack all this, or, cry into the pillow or whatever that looks like, right? But I have the ability to zoom out, right? And look at how these decisions are going to impact my clients 5, 10, 20 years down the line. And they just don't have the ability, right, in that moment to see that far in advance. It's too muddy. It's too murky.
Yeah.
And so I say, you're going to be your financial ally. Like, you might want to stop the bleeding right now, but I'm really looking out for your best interest in the future. And we talk a lot about like future you, and you can't see it, right? And a lot of times, and I'm sure you can talk about this too, right? Like post divorce, there becomes like this next chapter, this rebirth, and then there's a whole new version, which I knew was there, but you just didn't know it, right? When you're in it. And like you said in the beginning, a lot is based upon that fear, right? The fear of the
Mhm.
unknown, of like, hey, how am I going to survive this? How am I going to afford this? How am I going to live after this? Right now, we have the same pool of money supporting two households instead of one. How's that going to work, right? Will I be able to retire? Will I be able to pay for my kids' college? There's a lot of questions and a lot of fear. And sometimes people stay in very unhealthy relationships because of that fear. And what I like to say is, we I replaced the fear with facts, right? So we don't know if it's true. It's sort of like our brain, right, goes to that worst case scenario of what it might look like. And so that's sort of where the mindfulness comes in, to say like, all right, the flip side is true, right? What if it's great? But we don't know that until we run the numbers. So that's my job, is to say like, hey, we're going to be mindful, and we're going to know that there's a best case and a worst case, and know that you're probably going to fall somewhere in between that. But let's replace some of those fear of the unknowns with some real facts and figures. And then we can have those guardrails, so you come in more prepared and more emotionally regulated, knowing like what those boundaries might be.
Mhm. Mhm. So, can you walk us through a little bit of your process?
Yeah.
Like, someone first reaches out to you, what are some questions you ask them? Like, how do you sort of take them through getting to the facts of the situation?
Sure. Well, first, I'll just go a little backwards just to say what a CDFA is. The CDFA stands for Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, and we can be either a neutral, so both parties can hire us jointly and we can be a neutral, or one party can hire us and we can be an advocate. So that's an important distinction depending upon which role I'm playing. And we can also come in different parts of the process, right? So I ideally like to come in the early stages, right? Because I can prepare you better. And so we call that sort of the pre-divorce planning, or if you're quietly thinking of divorce. And that's where I help you get organized. So before, when you're having those like, hey, this isn't right, I know I don't want this to be my forever, I'm curious what it might look like, I'm curious what life might be like, that's when you meet with a CDFA and we can help you organize the documents. So what we do is let you know the documents that you're going to need, and help you find them, right? And a lot of times, if you are the non-CFO spouse and your partner maybe handled all of like the bigger things, the taxes, the investments, those relationships, you sometimes feel intimidated. And I always say like, hey, this is a financial puzzle piece. We're going to find it, right? We might not all have the pieces, but I know where to look. And together we can start putting it together one by one. So it used to be a lot easier before technology. Go home, get the mortgage statement that came in the mail. Now everything is like electronic, to an email. Yeah, two-factor authentication. I always say I like can't even get into my own account sometimes because I'm constantly forgetting passwords, let alone trying to like break into my husband's account. But there is a way. So just because you don't know everything doesn't mean you're not entitled to know things. And doesn't mean I don't know where to sort of point you to where to look. And during that financial clarity package, which is sort of like the pre-planning, we get all the documents that you need and we sort of just make a game plan of what might happen, right? What it might look like on the other side. And there's no guarantees, right? Because we're only responsible for our effort and not necessarily the outcome, right? But we can prepare. And so that always helps the client just get some clarity there. And sometimes clients say, you know what? I'm not ready yet financially or emotionally, and I'm going to save some more money, or I'm going to pay down this debt, or I'm going to wait till my kid turns X, right? And we sort of like walk through that, but they have a better understanding. Sometimes they say, all right, it's not as bad as I thought. Like, tell me who to call. Like, who's the next phone call, right? Like, I'm willing to do this. I'm pleasantly surprised at what the other side might look like. And sometimes people say, you know what, I really want to work it out, right? I want to take this information, talk to my spouse, have a better understanding of the finances, depending upon, what their troubles are. And let's go to our marriage counselor. But either way, the work that we do together in that sort of pre-planning stage is super helpful because it's just education, it's organization, it's knowledge. And I create a really safe space to answer questions, right? Because a lot of times, and I've seen this a lot because I'm, a financial planner, people are at those meetings because they feel like they have to be at those meetings, but they don't understand anything, right? Any of the acronyms that are saying, any of the words, and their eyes just glaze over. And I really try to break it down in simple terms, right? So you really understand and you have a safe space to ask questions and have a right to know what you own and why you own it.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the pre-planning aspect of it. And then sometimes I get called in the middle of it, whether it's amicable or if it's, litigious. So someone might say, hey, we're in a mediation. And then sometimes the mediators will call and say, hey, Melissa, I have a couple. They're doing great. We got their parenting plan figured out and they're great with custody, but we're trying to buy out this house and it's just the numbers aren't working. We don't have enough money. Like, can you come help us? How do we buy out this house with retirement assets? And we have to take taxes into consideration. So I can just come in for one piece of the puzzle. So that's sort of like a, limited scope and just say, hey, this is where we're at. Help us get over the hump, right? Help us finish mediation so that we can stay outside of court and amicable, keep the assets, for the family. And we'll do that. And then there's other times where people just are like, hey, I'm ready to sign on the dotted line. I think everything's right, but just like a review attorney, you just want somebody to sort of bless it and say, can you be my eyes and ears? Is there anything I'm missing here? Is there something I should be putting in this that I'm not thinking of, right? Maybe my kids are young and I'm not thinking about the wording, right? How we're going to handle college or how we're going to handle some of these things. So I can just do a review, like a settlement review, and just give my opinion on, hey, did you discuss X, Y, and Z with your attorney/mediator? Is there, it might be worth it to have more discussions around these areas. These are some of the things that, might cause a red flag later, just so that you don't go in and just sign anything without really understanding what you're signing. And then there's also the post-divorce transition. Like, okay, now I'm divorced. We've settled up, right? One person has moved out or we both, sold the house and have a new place and money has been exchanged, whether it's joint accounts be split or, retirement accounts be, sort of crossed, exchanged to equalize. And now it's like, hey, what do I do? Who am I? And what do I do?
Yeah.
And that's really important, right? You might not want to stay with the same financial advisor, right? It might be your spouse's, college roommate or something. You might not want to stay with your same accountant because it could be a referral from someone else. So I help in that rebuilding process to say, all right, are we changing our name, right? How are we going to manage this money? What does our cash flow look like now that we have to manage this by ourselves? And for some, that's like the hardest part of it is like, okay, now it's over. This is a new normal. And how do I navigate that, right? So I become the financial ally and I really try to meet my clients where they're at and just say,
Mhm.
tell me where you're at. Like, what are your pain points? And this is how I can help you. It's not one size fits all. And I think that's one of the misconceptions is that, okay, it has to be, every other weekend and Wednesday or, dinner. Like it doesn't have to look like that, especially if you're doing this outside of court and amicable, whether it's mediation, collaborative, or the sole agree process, you have the ability to customize what your divorce looks like, right? And what that co-parenting relationship looks like. And I think that's really important and something that most people don't really understand. They don't understand they have more control if they do it outside of court. And especially with kids, right? You and your spouse want to be the people that are making these decisions, not somebody in a black robe, right, that has never met you or your family. So I really try to push my clients and any prospects that I speak to towards, an amicable resolution outside of court. And there's so many great solutions now. And the other thing I really try to push is that team approach, because I think like you said, there's like this false narrative, right? You just have to, and I see it all the time on, like Facebook, right? Or social media. It's like, I need the biggest, fattest shark in town. And you're like, actually, no, you don't, right? You need a team of people supporting you. And you and I spoke about this the other day. Like when you get married, right? There's a bridal party, there's a team of people there for you through this whole process, right? And you need to build that for yourself when you're going through the divorce. And that could be friends and family or coworkers, but also the professionals, right? The mental health professional, the divorce coach, the CDFA, the mediator, the parenting coordinator. Like all of those people can play a really big role and alleviate a lot of that stress. And people, I think another myth that I want to debunk is that you can't afford all of these people. Because they think if like, okay, I'm going to call the lawyer and the lawyer can do all of these things. Um, it's not actually true. And I have a lot of great lawyers that I love and I work with, and they'll be the first ones to tell you, right? Like if you're calling your lawyer to look over your financial statements, their rate is a lot higher than mine, right? And then if you're calling me to vent about what happened or need advice on communication with your co-parent, I do not have the skill set to do that, right? For my clients, right? That would be more well served with a mental health professional and a divorce coach. And my rate is probably higher than your rate, right? So if everybody stays in their lane and does what they do best, you can have a team of 3 or more people that are truly supporting you through this. And I think that's really important. Um, and and the truth is that you don't want to hire a lawyer to go over your financial statements. My rate is much lower, right? And I know what to look for so I can
Yeah.
do it more efficiently. And you don't want to pay me, right, to give you advice or guidance on the parenting plan because that's not my zone of genius, right? And that's my rate is higher than the mental health professional. And I'm not equipped to give you that advice. So if you have 3 professionals that are staying in their lane and doing what they do best, you can have a team supporting you. And that's really, I have a book coming out next month and it's called Divorce by Design. And that's the whole theory of the book, right? To design your divorce and pick your team to feel really supported through this process.
Uh, you know, again, the analogy of getting married, right? Like, you have a bridal party, and you have this a planner, and you have this person in charge of flowers and the venue and everything, and why would you not do that with this other life transition? It's so stigmatized, I talk about this all the time, and it keeps people from getting the help that they need, but it is just a life transition, and by investing in all these different experts, you are really getting the help that you need. You're ultimately saving money and time, in the end because you really are kind of curating your team.
Absolutely. You're saving time and money and energy, more importantly. I think that's really important aspect of it because Divorce can be really emotionally draining and financially draining. So we want to be efficient with your time, your money, and your energy. And by having a divorce team, right, in that emotional space, the financial space, and then the legal space, you can feel truly supported.
Building your team, saving you money, ultimately in the end, saving you time, really feeling like you're at the end of the day, it's like you are deciding to change your life, and that is an unexpected thing, like, nobody plans to get divorced, right? Like, nobody wants to, but at a point in time, it's like, this is happening, and so you might as well do it the best way you can, and there's so many opportunities and silver linings, and, I talk about that kind of stuff all the time, but I love, what you've talked about with your book of, like, designing your team to help you with this because you don't have to do it alone, you don't have to figure this out alone. Exactly. Yep, totally. Yeah, right, totally. And when you were outlining your process before, I was thinking, like, how well professionals like yourself and myself can work throughout the process, right? Because a client can be, working with you on the finances and trying to process what that means for their future, and then I could talk about it with them, and they can come back to you and be like, "Okay, I decided this, or I have this other question." I'm certainly not a financial person, so I can talk about, "Okay, well, what are you envisioning? How does that feel? How does this change things?" Right? And so it makes so much sense to, like, have professionals that really complement each other and work in tandem. Yeah.
That's so important. And a lot of times I see that most, right, is with the marital home. Oftentimes it's the couple's biggest asset. If one party wants to keep it, a lot of times, it's for the children. Perhaps it's for a school district, or they're not just emotionally ready to like move or have the energy, right, to do that. And so there's a lot there that sometimes we have to unpack, right? And is it you don't want to leave because you're not ready, right? And then maybe we do a delayed sale, right? Or is it you don't want to leave because your kids, right, the school district and the friends and the neighborhood or the community that you have there, um, but I focus right on the numbers and like, is this making sense? Right. And that's a perfect example of where you would come in and help really unpack and peel the layers of the onion back to say, like, all right, what does this look like? What could this look like? What are the pros and the cons, right, of this? And let's marry that with the financial aspect of it and walk through to have a real life settlement. Because I think a lot of times people, go through this process and they put numbers down on paper and they're like, okay, we're going to divide this and split this, and this is how much you'll get. But we have to stress test that in real life, right? Like we have to take taxes into consideration. We have to take inflation into consideration, and just the cost of life, right? Like life keeps lifing, and we have to make sure that it's feasible so that you don't have to come back to a mediator or an attorney a couple of years later to modify things, right? I'd rather spend a little bit more time with the team crafting it, right? Designing this so that you don't have to go back and fix it later.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, and the pros and cons are so important, right? Because I imagine a lot of people, right, I wanna keep the house, I wanna keep this, I wanna, and so, like, me helping them or another professional helping them to think through, like, why, right? What about this is important? What might this look like? If you're really stretched to pay your mortgage by yourself, what is that trade-off? That's a really stressful life. How is that gonna impact your ability to parent and do other things? And, to really help people understand, like, right, the why behind the decision they are attached to, they're sort of attached to an outcome. And yeah, and so I think it's so important to get clarity on the facts of what it would look like and also the emotional piece of it.
So I love that teamwork approach. I love being able to like consult with my clients, other professionals behind the scenes and with them so that they really do feel supported and we get the best outcome for them. And it's again, I believe it should be very customized, right? It depends upon, whether um your children have special needs, right? If, we have to travel for work, what that parenting schedule looks like, right? If we have family involved or community near us, like all of those things really matter. And it takes, right? Like when I do my financial analysis, I take some of that information, right, from you, from the mental health professional, and blend it in to write my financial decisions. So that's really important.
What's kind of like the biggest piece of advice that you would give, someone who's somewhere in the process or thinking about it, or like, just words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would just say you don't want divorce remorse, right? People sometimes think like, okay, I just want to get this over with quickly.
Mhm.
But quick is not always best.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that it makes sense sometimes to slow it down so that you don't regret it. And you really want to know what you're signing to and what this means in real life in the future. So I often talk about like future you, um, and really building what's best for your future.
And yeah, people always wanna get it done because it is so tough, very unpleasant, and once people kind of decide, then they wanna get it over with. Like, I see a lot of lead up to deciding, "Okay, I'm gonna do this," but then once they decided, it's like, "Okay, now I'm done." But it's a journey, right? And yeah, and things are always changing. So when does your book come out?
My book comes out next month, April. I'm very excited. It's called Divorce by Design. And it's for the end user, right? Who's someone who's thinking about divorce. If you have a friend or family member, coworker thinking about divorce, just really telling them what options they have outside of court. What are the pros and cons? Who are the people that they can have on their divorce team? And how we really work together for those custom outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, staying out of court is so important. It's just so much stress on the parents. I mean, you just cannot parent well if you are in the middle of a court case. I mean, it's just you just can't. You just can't be present for your kids. You can't focus on rebuilding your life, and for what, right? It just doesn't most of the time. I guess there are extreme cases, but most of the time, it's not worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the misconceptions too. Like we have to go to court and you don't. There's a lot of great options out there. Mediation, there's collaborative divorce, and there's a new process out there called Soul Agree. And all of them allow you to customize your divorce, and the outcome for what's best for your family and outside of court, right? So you give up that control once you hand it over to the court system because you're no longer in control of the timeline specifically.
Yeah, and that's just so no one wants a court parenting their kid. I mean, because you don't even really want your co-parent parenting your kid, you know? So, so reminding people of that and that there are options, and it's just so great that there are people who specialize in divorce finances, like, it's so important, and again, it just makes it so much less scary and more attainable and people more optimistic about a future, and it's great because it really is a topic that people don't like to talk about, you know?
Yeah, and it's all about, like, the relationship with money too, right? Your relationship with money can change after your divorce too, right? And, that's one of my favorite parts, that post-divorce work that you can do when, the spouse who is not the CFO spouse really takes ownership for what they own and how they start investing and planning their retirement. And I love that light bulb moment where they're like, "Hey, I can do this." That's really,
Absolutely.
really rewarding for me.
Yeah, it's intimidating, and I imagine it's I mean, not all the time, but probably it's mostly women who, find their financial freedom and realize they can do things on their own and realize it does not take a rocket science to figure out finances. And if you spend some time and consult with the professionals, you could do it. It doesn't have to be this big scary thing. You got it. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited for your book. I'm so excited to read it. I'm going to recommend it to clients and I have a divorce group and they have lots of questions about finances and it's a lot of people who are in the contemplative process and feel anxious about it. So I think this will be a great resource for them.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it being here. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. This has been Talk Relationship to Me. I'm Dr. Elana Hoffman. If you have a question about relationships, you come to the right place. You can reach me at drelanahoffman.com or find me on Instagram at dr.elanahoffman. And Melissa, can you just tell our listeners where to find you?
Absolutely. Yeah. My company's name is Mindful Divorce Partners. So you can find me on LinkedIn, the website. I offer complimentary consultations if anybody is thinking that they might need a CDFA on their team or need some other resources. I'm always happy to refer out to the different specialties that I have within my network. So mindfuldivorcepartners.com, and the book is called Divorce by Design.
Amazing. Thank you so much.